Hi, it's Alexander Russo from The Grade. This is the Education Show, and I have here today none other than the New Haven Independent's Paul Bass. Paul, welcome to the show.
Nice to talk to you again, Alexander.
For people who might not know who you are and what you do, can you give us the three-sentence version?
Yeah, I run the Online Journalism Project. It's an online media organization in New Haven, Connecticut. We publish the New Haven Independent, a 21-year-old online news site for which school reporting has always been a central beat. We also publish the Valley Independent Sentinel, which covers issues including schools in the North Valley in New Haven. WNHH-FM, which is a bilingual radio station in conjunction with La Voz Hispana, Spanish language newspaper. And we also work with local sites around the country to help them become stable.
I first got to know you and your work because the New Haven Independent has had a long series of, I'm just going to call them all-star education reporters and a lot of good coverage.
Thank you.
Right? I'm going to name some people now. Melissa Bailey, a legend. Aaliyah Swaby, I hope I'm saying her name right. Christopher Peak, and now Maya McFadden. There are probably others, but you guys were...
There have been 4 in 21 years. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, well, you guys are known for your education coverage, and we've written about it a couple times along the way. I'm here to talk about that, but also to talk about other things. But let's talk about education coverage for a second at least. How did it become such a strength of the Independent?
Well, 2 ways. One is when we founded, it was back in 2005 when there really wasn't online-only local news. So we were trying to think, what's the stuff not being covered anymore now that legacy media have gotten rid of local reporters? And one of the first main things was schools, both the school board and physically being in schools. So we just noticed that the school board members, including the mayor, weren't showing up at the school board. So we took attendance and showed that their truancy rates were higher than those that had people expelled from the high school students. So that led into it. And then it just happened to be a time where the state of the schools became a central issue in a mayoral campaign. And we decided to go whole hog with a really non-ideological approach about what is school reform. The assumption that people just thought the schools weren't good and had to change. And it did lead to the city experimenting with what at the time was a novel approach to enlisting Randy Weingarten to come to New Haven to do the first teacher union collaborative way of evaluating teachers and removing teachers who aren't performing well after they've gotten help, if it's been identified, in which teachers, and the union said, we don't want bad teachers, but we don't want capricious ways of having them judged. So they would be part of a panel sort of similar to ours. So anyway, that's how it became that. And then it's taken, as the issues have emerged and as different reporters have taken it, we've covered schools in different ways. I love reading your site because so many reporters now around the country do so much interesting schools coverage. I do not consider our site at the top or at the bottom or in the middle. I just think so many sites now are doing interesting approaches to schools. And this is just part of our DNA now. Schools reporting is a top beat.
Right. One of the things that I'd forgotten and don't know whether it was part of what you covered, I can't imagine it wasn't, is there were these, I'm going to call them reform union leaders. There was a loose association of them. This might be the 90s or the 2000s. That were trying to do things differently. And then there's my single favorite piece of education coverage that you personally ever did, which is when you interviewed the arrested teacher. Do you remember that one?
I felt for the guy, and the videos are interesting. He wasn't blameless, but the way he's dealt with was very interesting, and he felt he got justice in the end. He liked being heard.
I love that you found the most vilified person in the story, and you said, okay, I'm going to go interview. Currently, for example, there's a woman at Stanford named Jo Boaler, who's a math instruction expert. And she, in some education circles, is the most hated person in the world. And I'm just like, please, someone go do what Paul did. Go talk to her.
The way I got that was just lucky. He was a MAGA guy who happened to be friends with this cop. Who was a MAGA cop who told him, go talk to Paul. He'll let your story be heard. And he said, but he's some kind of like liberal. He said, no, but he's always like fair to us and he lets us be heard. So that's how that worked. It was nice.
Right. Are there lots of examples of that in the Paul Bass archive or in the New Haven Independent archive?
Sort of like I've been a reporter here 45 years, and the people I've had the best relationships with are often the people I've written the toughest articles about. If you listen
Right.
to people and they feel they get a fair shake, it
Yeah.
improves your reporting, because one of the beauties, one of the joys of being a reporter is that you don't have to be right. Like
Yeah.
other human beings, we have opinions, we have biases, and it's really fun to like interact with people who see the world differently, because you're never right and they're never right. Like, we're all trying to figure out, like, look at
Right.
all the stuff you've covered over the years of all the arguments about how best to school reform, how best to bring kids back after the pandemic, how best to deal with absenteeism, how best to deal with school finances. There's really not usually, like, sometimes people do something terrible, but it's not usually villains and heroes. It's usually, we're all trying to figure it out, and based
Right.
on day-to-day experience, what we cover, we adjust what we think, and we try to figure it out.
There was a long time where people were vilifying Trump's first education secretary, whose name is eluding me right now.
Me
Do you
too.
remember her?
I remember Linda McMahon now because we know her
Yeah,
well,
right,
but I didn't remember
right,
your
right.
name.
Well, the original Linda McMahon was getting really critical treatment in the press, and then NPR's This American Life went and did a segment about her. It was only 10 or 15 minutes long, but they went back to her hometown. They found the school where she used to volunteer at, and they weren't trying to exonerate her. They weren't trying to say that she wasn't who she was, but they did some due diligence and said, well, here's where she came from, and she'd been a volunteer in schools for longer than a lot of people who go on and on about school reform. And it's that kind of giving everyone a shake coverage that I really like.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about not about education reform. I'm sorry, about education journalism, because a couple of times we've talked and you've said things to me that I thought were really important and that education journalists and editors really might want to learn about. You mentioned a Facebook page. Everyone looks down on Facebook. You mentioned a radio station or a radio show. This is all 5 years ago, so it may be outdated, but are there tricks, strategies that you've learned and done that maybe other people could do but haven't?
Well, we're all trying to figure out what radio is, right? We started an FM community radio station, bilingual, 10 years ago, and we were wrong. We thought it'd be like people driving the car listening to radio. As you know, and you're filming this podcast, radio is now 90% of the time consumed visually, not live.
Right.
So our radio station that we started became a place to do longer discussions with people and to let people in the community, especially people of color who might not have access to journalism jobs, the mic to actually do their own shows. We've actually gotten some people who are in the schools, one of whom I actually don't agree with his perspective. He does a show, a retired teacher, about education issues, but about all issues in town. The people we cover, we do like, you get them in for a half hour, an hour, and really talk to everyone from like the person who volunteers in neighborhood groups and city plan their life to the mayor or the state representative and teachers, and teachers union president comes on a lot. So we're trying to figure out what radio is. It's podcasting, but we actually do it on FM as well, but it's mostly podcast across many platforms. There's
Yeah.
actually different kinds of podcasts. I'm sure you'll find this out. I'm sure certain kinds of shows you do get heard on Twitter video and others on Facebook or Instagram. So I think you have to be on all the platforms all the time.
Okay.
And Facebook, I don't remember what we discussed, but we have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page, we have and our radio stuff goes on about 8 platforms, including Twitch. So.
Oh, wow, including Twitch. Okay. Well, I'm curious about that. Let's talk about that for another minute now, because the education sites that I know have been really slow and hesitant about spending much time doing audio or video. You've done it. You've made some mistakes, but learned some lessons. What besides thinking that broadcast was the way to go? What else did you learn, or what else would you recommend? Let's say you were in charge of education journalism, or you were in charge of Chalkbeat for a month. What would you tell
Well, I don't want
folks?
to say Chalkbeat because they do so many things. They have so much money. They've tried a million more things I haven't even thought about. As a local news site that wants to incorporate education as your beat, incorporate it into different ways of delivering it. So like what we do radio, you're going to call it podcasting. Incorporate people you deal with either as hosts of interviews or being interviewed, and then merge the media. When we do an interview with, let's say we had the school superintendent on last year, I also
Right.
wrote an article not about the whole interview. Nobody wants to read a transcript. You can get those really well. AI transcripts are good now with Otter. You can just get that. But if you're being the reporter who's saying, here's what was interesting about my 50-minute interview with the school superintendent, you write that as like a 12-graph story, and then you embed the whole interview so that people then who are interested can see everything they had to say in that context. And what I've learned from that is it often isn't immediate. It's often like 3 years later. Like this morning, we were writing about a court case involving a former cop who was crooked, who I knew, I used to interview. And the city took a stand on this case where he framed someone for murder. And the reporter found an old radio interview with the previous mayor talking about that case where the city took a different position and re-linked it, re-embedded it, used that as the material. So I guess one thing we've learned in the last 20 years of local journalism is that what we're trying to preserve is the showing up, covering, thinking, getting everyone in the conversation. It's not the format. The first lesson was it's not print necessarily. Now it's not even the website version of print, but that you're actually a newsroom, you're not a publication, that you're using all platforms as much as you can when appropriate to reach people where they are in different ways and link them back.
Right. I got to ask about Twitch because that's hilarious. And
so I know nothing about Twitch. You see, we have a guy who runs our radio station who's actually a brilliant first adopter. He's the one who realized in 2017 that radio is no longer radio. Radio is a million platforms, including video.
Right.
And I don't know what's up with Twitch now. Twitch had its moment, remember?
Right.
It wasn't just gamers, but then everybody was on it to get there. And, just like SoundCloud. We're still on SoundCloud, but that had its moment. The music industry, that's where.
But the idea is go where people are and be everywhere.
And that it's not one place. So, for instance, we have a radio show with a guy with more of an urban beat, Fly Tie. He gets everyone on Facebook. He has like a lot of fun on Facebook. When we get like 1,000 people right there on Facebook, other people, they might listen to the live stream. They might find it embedded in an article.
Right.
But it's not one.
One of the things, I was talking to a guy named Alan Gottlieb. He's a longtime education journalism guy. You probably haven't heard of him before, but he's one of the original co-founders of Chalkbeat. And he had started something called Ed News Colorado way back. And when Chalkbeats came together, Colorado was one of the original sites. And basically, they absorbed what he was doing along with what was going on here in New York. He said something to me that really caught my eye. He said, we decided that we were going to do no commentary, no columns, no editorial positions, no op-eds, because we wanted to just be straight news. And he said, I regret that. And I'm curious about what your view on commentary, op-eds, et cetera is.
Do you mind if I give you more than one sentence?
Yeah, please.
So I came from alt weeklies, which were very opinionated reporting.
Right.
And we used to think back in the 80s and 90s, the radical thing you did was critique the way the local paper covered the school board and the city council. And then I thought the radical thing to do starting in the mid-20s was actually show up the school board and city council, tell you what happened, because they weren't doing that anymore, and that your opinion no longer mattered because so many people can weigh in on the comments. And I saw commenters as the new op-ed people times 20. And you normally had 15, 20 people in the community who would comment regularly and 10 on every article, and they became the new op-ed people to this day. We have people, they tend to be more conservative, but not only, who our readers read it for that.
Right.
My thinking did evolve. In 2007, with this really chunky phone before there was YouTube, I used to go to my compost heap and pretend that was our newsroom. I was pulling old stories out and commenting it, and that became the once a week. As a nonprofit, we couldn't do editorials to endorse candidates anymore, which I thought was good.
Right.
But we could do opinions if we wanted. I felt the opinionated reporting wasn't important anymore, but I did a commentary I thought should be on video where it had personality and point of view that wrapped up the news in an opinionated way. So I'd pull stories out of the compost with props and say, this is the news through the view of our assignment desk recycling the stories.
Right.
That became, as you saw in the last presidential election, one of the brilliant moves by the Trump administration was to understand the advent of influencers as the way people got their information in an opinionated way. And while some people don't like the way it puts people into silos, I actually sometimes like it. Like I work with a guy who's conservative who watches it all. And he actually finds out what a lot of different people are thinking about, and he's very intelligent. He's able to sift through the news in this way that is different in scale, but not in theory from what used to happen when you had editorials, op-eds. There was just fewer of them when more gate controllers. So I actually still do, the only editorial we do a week is I still go to my compost heap. Now, people got way above me in terms of technology and all that. We still do it down and dirty. So we do a once a week editorial that people like as a way to relate to you. But I don't know that I agree with the Chalkbeat person. I don't think there's a rule that you have to do opinion or not do opinion. I think what's important is caring and being genuine. For
Right.
some people, being genuine is to be opinionated. They tell you what their opinion is. You got to engage with people. For other people, the choice of what you're covering, because of course Chalkbeat is still doing opinion. They're deciding these issues are interesting to cover and these people are worth talking to.
Right.
So they're just not saying their opinion is important, which I agree with. Our opinions are important.
Right.
So
He
I don't think he was wrong, but I think you're right that we need to be open to very many different ways of presenting information and perspective and not worry about the old categories. Just remember our mission is to show up, to care, to listen and think and get everybody in.
Right. What's it like, or what was it like originally? I've seen some of the compost heap bits that you do. What was it like, or what is it like, both for you as the journalist and for the readers? Because there are a lot of people who they might do a video interview like we're doing now. We're talking to each other on camera, right? But looking at the camera, no other person to talk to, right? And just talking straight on, that's a thing that freaks people out. I think is the technical term. Um, but it also can be very compelling. Can you say a couple more
Yeah, I
words about
think the one thing is to be short. Now, there's some people like Joe Rogan who can go for 3 hours with a guest, and
with the
people
guest?
stay the 3 hours when he talks to Bernie or Trump did very well in his hour and a half, whatever was Rogan.
Yeah,
I think in the thing I'm doing with the opinion thing there, you got to be tight. You got to have fun. If you're not having fun, they weren't having fun. When you're talking about
right,
serious stuff like life and death and people's reputations, of course, you'd be serious. You'd be a little more
right,
playful when you talk about issues. But I think you got to cut it down. Like I always struggle to make sure I don't hit 5 minutes. And I try never to have any idea I'm talking about go over a minute, which is sometimes hard when it's complicated.
right.
It's always embedded with stuff I can give links to. But
Okay.
it's interesting to me, the people
Yeah,
who now watch those videos, it used to be that I was early adopter and then people got into YouTube.
yeah,
It's now 80-year-old people from my shul who that's the way they find out about local news in New Haven and it's fun and they chuckle. And what they're getting out of it is the information. Like,
right.
oh, I didn't know that they were like towing cars that way this week. I didn't realize that they didn't charge that guy enough for his taxes. Like, so it reinforced my idea. And it's not scale for me. For some people like Rogan, of course, it's scale. For
Right.
me, it's sort of being part of a larger way of presenting news. So getting back to your short beat guy, it's not that you should only do editorials or if you're going to do opinion. I agree that with his conclusion that you don't rule out stuff.
Right.
But I think it's part of a larger mix in which you're finding different ways to speak with people,
Yeah.
presenting it different ways, and that the common thread just have to be invent, be creative, care, be open to other people, and have fun.
Yeah. No, no, no. That certainly helps also that you have this visual element of being out in the world. The only other person I've seen who's done a similar thing, she's an education person or was an education person. There was a reporter named Mandy McLaren at the Boston Globe, and she
Oh,
would
right,
do,
she blew up. She
she
just
was on
blew up,
TikTok,
right?
right?
They
She
love
was,
her accent.
no, no, that's a different,
Oh,
sorry,
that's a
that,
different one. Okay.
yeah, yeah. The accent is amazing.
Yeah.
No, Mandy would go on, she did TikTok, and she didn't go outside. She was sitting at a desk, but she figured out how to make the Boston Globe stories that she was working on show up behind her. So she'd be like a little head in the corner. You've probably seen this online. She was a little head in the corner, and then behind her would be the story she'd worked on and what she thought about it and how it came to be, how she reported it, and what the reaction has been. So a little bit of a visual wraparound for people, and then the story was linked to in TikTok. And she said to me, she said, I went to TikTok thinking that I was going to find teenagers, right? And of course, she didn't. She found other parents and other grown-ups, which was fine. They were new to her. She was new to them. That had a little bit of that fun, though, that you're describing.
You know what my favorite thing to watch, which is not a fun thing? The New York Times homepage. They'll get a
Yeah,
reporter like David Sanger or someone covering a big story. They will do such a well-edited explainer of a
mm,
major story in a minute.
yeah,
They do the thing, they don't go over 2 minutes. And of
yeah.
course, they have the money, unlike her, unlike me at my compost heap, doing it
Right,
under 5 cents. They
right,
have really sophisticated graphics and editing, but it's
right,
still the person's voice, and I get a lot out of it. Even though I'm reading all the stories in the Times, I get a
right.
lot out of that 2 minute explainer about something about the war like that.
And this is them talking directly to you, or are they talking to a host?
They directly go to if you look on the homepage of the Times, almost every day there's one video about only not that far down on the homepage where one of
Okay.
the reporters it's not how they got the story.
Right.
I'm not a big fan of that, but I understand people like that.
Uh-huh.
They are just saying, this thing I've been covering, here's how you understand it. And it is a little opinionated, even from the news reporters sometimes, but what's best about it, it so clearly walks you through a story that you're reading every day with the sort of perspective of how it fits together in where
Right.
inflation's going, where a war is going, where some social trend is going with cell phones. And,
Oh,
you know, I
interesting.
still read the articles, but I get a lot out of it that way. So
Oh,
video is a
I'm gonna
fun.
check that out. That's interesting, and that's also different than the, 5 years ago, the interview, the Daily, was them interviewing their own reporters, and that was audio only, and it was guest to host. This sounds like it's video and straight on. I got to check that out.
And what it tends to be older reporters. But what I learned, my first insight when I started The Independent, was
Yeah.
that the fun thing about being a reporter now, it's so different from our day. Do you remember we used to have a photographer go with us on a story?
Uh-huh.
We would write a story. Somebody else would do graphics. That now the modern reporter, people growing up more tech savvy, you do all the things yourself. So sometimes you are thinking, this is a video thing, this is a writing thing, this is how am I going to tell this with photos? How am I going to
Right.
get a photo in this? And it's a good thing. Because at first it was seen as union busting because everyone had categories. Sort of like when you talk about education, sometimes stuff gets
Yeah.
calcified in
Yeah.
old categories when the world has changed, even though you do have to not just get rid of people. But I found that with journalism now, what we're really talking about here with what kind of video to do and when to do video, when to do opinion or not, you really need a reporter ideally to have most. Nobody has every skill, whether it's to have an analytical perspective, whether you're good on a camera, whether you're good at using a camera, video or not video, whether you're good at graphics, whether you're good at long form writing, short form writing. You get to do it all with the web. And it makes you a better reporter and a more full reporter, and it makes the reader relate to you more, and it gives you more ways to tell a story. That's why I felt, Alexander, that we are in the golden age of journalism. I think
Huh.
everyone thought for the last 20 years that journalism was dying because some old papers closed. And I always felt the people saying that are like people who are assigned to cover a funeral home. All you
Right.
see all day is people dying. But outside the funeral home, everyone's getting born and tried new things. And
Right.
both things are true.
Nice. I love that. The one thing from the old day, before my time, for sure, but I've heard about the one thing that I'd like from the old day back. I think field reporting is a particular skill, and a lot of education journalists have not done a ton of it, or it's not their their strength. I'd love. Some people call them runners. Some people call them a leg man or a street guy. These are people who used to go get the story and then call it in, and then
Get
someone
me
would write.
rewrite, honey.
Right. So I'm always looking for firsthand depictions of events. And I don't really particularly care for this. I watch the board meeting on the live stream kind of thing because you and I.
That was a horror that came with
Well, people still
with
cover
the
things
code. I
that way.
know, and it's such. And you know what's even worse, in my opinion,
What's
the
that?
way that reputable news organizations are using AI to analyze recordings of meetings to tell you what's important. And
Right.
where I agree with you, Alexander, is that what a reporter does is show up and watch and listen. And
Yeah.
while those summaries are very good in telling you what the main topics were and what was said, you have to be there and think and know your part to know
Right.
that what someone told you on the side outside the meeting or what one person brought up at the public comment section of the Board of Ed for
Right.
3 minutes was
Right.
actually the story.
Right.
And
Or
then you have people there to be accountable to and people you meet. So
right.
I am very disappointed since COVID at how people started using Zoom and now they're using AI. There are good things to use AI for. But as you know, they're using it, what you're calling a leg man. Because I do like when we sometimes have breaking news and someone's calling in stuff. First of all, I totally agree with you that there is no substitute for showing up. We're not robots. There are some functions for robots, but we can get to real estate journalism too, which is the most important. Being a robot makes you miss the whole community and has no role in local journalism. But
Yeah.
also, yeah, so I think showing up is so important and not using AI for that and not relying on recorded meetings.
We'd have to call it something other than the leg man in 2026, though. Is there anyone out there that you see doing good work? I know you're not you're not reading everything, but you're probably reading a lot. Is there anyone out there who you're really liking right now?
I love the Jersey City Times.
Okay.
Just full disclosure, that's one of the sites we help.
Okay.
400,000 people live there. It's grown 20% in 10 years. It's going to grow another 20%. It's 2 inches from Manhattan. When Mamdani Rand said, my goal is to have everyone stop moving from Jersey City. There's this great history of Scrappy. It's the most diverse city in the country, according to one measure. Everyone from Jared Kushner to every other developer in New York is putting 50-story skyscrapers up while fighting with people to preserve parks and views. Education is huge there. They have a really good education reporter there, Sarah Komar, who I would recommend you put on your show at some point. She's young. but they're scrappy. They show up to everything. And
Yeah.
they just saved the city like $30 million when a corrupt outgoing mayor tried to slip into a meeting agenda in under 24 hours that it was going to give a big tax breaks to an out developer who fit his campaign just as he was leaving for a project that wasn't going to get built. That was from showing up, being in the room, and they do schools that way. And back to your other point, I don't think you can cover schools without being in the classroom. I don't think
Right.
you can cover the Board of Ed without being at the Board of Ed meeting.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are just a robot, and you have minor utility that people who really want to make things happen will then use your work.
Yeah, I used to work for a board of ed and used to work for an elected official before the journalism thing. And the journalists who scared me in a good way were the journalists who were looking at the nervous staffers fidgeting over to the side of the room rather than paying attention to the theater that we had set up for them in front, right? The good reporters were looking at us and they were like, oh, okay, that guy looks really nervous. I'm going to go talk to him. And then
It's always going in the back of the room and watching and talking. Yeah.
it's the back of the room. Um, Before we wrap up, and thank you for doing this. This is so helpful and so interesting. And I love that you think this is such a great time in journalism, because I think it might be. I'm really excited about non-traditional journalists. People are really anxious and dismissive of them, but I came into journalism 25 years ago as a blogger, and people were really dismissive of us, but then they realized, oh, there's something that bloggers do that people really like, and a couple of the best bloggers got pulled into traditional news outlets. So I think we're at a period like that. I agree with you.
So a blog is what created the New Haven Independent. I was on a book leave from my job at Alt Weekly, seeing how big companies, including one that just bought our Alt Weekly, was decimating everything. And I found this blog in, what's the one in Montclair, New Jersey? Remember that one? That was one of the first
Yeah.
ones.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was delaying turning in my manuscript, I would notice in the course of a day, they would post something that happened at the school as a fire drill. Then they noticed that all these people standing outside. Then readers would put in, hey, that's what's different. In our day, school wasn't like that. Someone else posted, no, in your day, everyone was white. We pulled the fire alarm too. Then they went back in and a teacher posted,
Right.
you know what this is really about? We can't breathe in this building because the windows are so bad. And someone else wrote in, when's the next school board meeting I want to attend? So I said, we're all looking down at bloggers. They're in their pajamas. But they're doing something with this new technology that is better than what we did traditional journalism, is that they're involving the public, they're using real-time reporting, and they have a forum where everybody can continue the story and create it. And that was the inspiration for the New Haven Independent. How can you take that? And no one was reading local news online then. How can you take that, merge it with journalism, and make it online?
You guys were you guys ever in print? I know some people really held on to print.
In the 1980s, there was a New Haven Independent weekly.
Right.
It was a separate for-profit effort that I was part of. We lost $1 million of other people's money. A recession hit, but it was a weekly paper for 3 years. But I revived the name 20-something years later, 25 years later when I did the Independent.
There was an education nonprofit in Chicago called Catalyst, and they printed for a long, long time. They ended up merging into the Chicago Reporter. The idea being that people weren't online. I guess this is an outdated idea now, that people weren't online or couldn't afford to be online. That's not necessary anymore.
But I think in 10 years, whatever, like we're thinking 10-year windows. In 10 years, the final fight will be print, because robots are going to be controlling so much of the information, how it's collected, and even who's talking to each other, as AI actually crafts the statements that officials give and that readers give to each other. I think it's going to be samizdat, with people going into the schools and the school board, printing their own printed material that they can distribute in a local way, that in 10 years, that's who you're going to be interviewing.
Amazing. I don't know how I think about that, but it's interesting to think about. Paul Bass from the New Haven Independent and the Online Journalism Project. Great to talk to you. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts.
It's always a pleasure, and keep up the good work, Alexander.